First contact catastrophe. The Zephyrians had ruled the Andromeda Milky Way confluence for over 10,000 years. Their crystalline bodies housed minds that operated on principles most organic species couldn't comprehend. They had mastered gravity manipulation before most species discovered fire. When their long-range sensors detected the first crude faster-than-light signatures from the spiral arm of an unremarkable galaxy, they dispatched an observation team out of mere protocol rather than interest. Captain Nixala of the Zephyrian science vessel Eternal Clarity reviewed the data with growing disbelief. The bipedal mammals had achieved FTL travel using a method considered theoretically impossible by the confluence's leading minds. Their solution wasn't elegant. It was almost barbaric in its simplicity, but it worked. They bypassed 3 fundamental development stages, she reported to the High Council. Their technological progression is chaotic. They adopt solutions that work rather than solutions that make sense. The High Counselor's crystalline face rippled with concern. Assess their threat level. Minimal. Nixala responded without hesitation. Their technology is primitive. Their social structures are disorganized. They spend more resources fighting among themselves than advancing their civilization. We could integrate them as a Category 4 protected species. The decision was made. Humanity would be approached, catalogued, and guided into the confluence as a junior species under Zephyrian protection. No one anticipated that this would be the beginning of the end for Zephyrian dominance. First contact occurred on a Tuesday. Dr. Elena Vasquez was working late at the Mars colony's Deep Space Monitoring Station when the screens lit up with an incoming vessel that dwarfed anything humans had ever constructed. The massive crystalline ship, elegant beyond comprehension, decelerated from superluminal velocities with impossible precision, coming to rest in high Mars orbit. "Houston, we have a situation," she reported, her voice remarkably steady, "and it's definitely not one of ours." The Zephyrian delegation materialized inside the Mars Colonial Authority headquarters exactly 6 hours later. Their translucent bodies refracted light in hypnotic patterns as they moved. The automated defense systems didn't even register them as threats. The technology gap was so vast that human security measures couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. "Greetings, emerging civilization." The lead Zephyrian communicated directly into the minds of everyone present. "We are representatives of the Andromeda Milky Way confluence. We have come to welcome you into the galactic community and provide guidance as you develop." Colonel James Harper, the highest-ranking military official present, stepped forward with a diplomatic smile that masked his tactical assessment. "On behalf of humanity, welcome to our home system. We're honored by your visit and eager to learn." The Zephyrians, accustomed to awe and submission from newly contacted species, were pleased by this response. They presented their proposal. Humanity would receive technological assistance, cultural guidance, and protection in exchange for accepting Zephyrian oversight and resource-sharing agreements. What the aliens failed to understand was that Colonel Harper's agreeable demeanor wasn't submission. It was buying time. Within minutes of the Zephyrians' arrival, every military, scientific, and intelligence agency on Earth had gone to maximum alert. While humanity's official representatives smiled and nodded, thousands of the planet's brightest minds were analyzing every scrap of data they could gather about these crystalline visitors. Dr. Vasquez noticed it first, subtle fluctuations in the Zephyrians' crystalline structure when they communicated. "They're not using technology," she whispered to her colleague. "Their bodies are their technology." The revelation spread through human intelligence networks like wildfire. Within 48 hours, research teams had assembled working theories about Zephyrian biology, psychology, and technological capabilities. They were indeed advanced beyond human comprehension in many ways, but they had vulnerabilities too. The Zephyrians, meanwhile, began their standard integration protocol. Their delegation expanded to 20 ships, positioning themselves throughout the solar system to assist humanity. When they requested permission to establish a permanent administrative center on Earth's moon, the United Earth Council responded with polite enthusiasm. "Of course," said Secretary General Maria Chen, "but we have some questions about the proposed resource-sharing agreements." This was the first signal that something was amiss. In the Zephyrians' 10,000-year history of absorbing new species, none had ever questioned the terms. Species at humanity's development stage were expected to be grateful for any attention from the advanced confluence. "The terms are standard," replied High Administrator Voxleth, his crystalline form flickering with barely perceptible irritation. "All emerging species receive the same integration package." Secretary General Chen smiled diplomatically. "We understand, but humanity has some unique circumstances. Perhaps we could discuss modifications." The negotiations stretched from days into weeks. The Zephyrians found themselves increasingly frustrated by human diplomatic tactics. The Earth delegates would agree to principles, then question every detail of implementation. They would accept technological offerings with gratitude, then immediately ask about limitations and restrictions that no species had ever inquired about before. Behind the scenes, humanity was buying time. Every piece of Zephyrian technology was being reverse-engineered as soon as it was received. Every interaction was analyzed for insights into their psychology and social structure. The picture that emerged was troubling. The confluence wasn't the benevolent galactic family it presented itself to be. It was a hierarchical empire with the Zephyrians firmly at the top and most other species serving as little more than resource providers and labor pools. The breaking point came 3 months after first contact. A routine scan by the Deep Space Monitoring Network revealed that the Zephyrian fleet had positioned weapons platforms throughout the solar system, installations they had never mentioned in their diplomatic exchanges. Colonel Harper, now promoted to general and head of Earth's Defense Council, called an emergency meeting. "They're not here to welcome us. They're here to assimilate us. But we can't possibly stand against their technology," argued the representative from the European coalition. "They're thousands of years ahead of us." Dr. Vasquez cleared her throat. "Actually, that might not matter as much as you think. The plan that humanity devised wasn't elegant. It wasn't even particularly advanced. But like many human solutions throughout history, it didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to work." On what would later be known as Liberation Day, humanity struck, not with weapons or direct confrontation. That would have been suicide. Instead, they deployed a specially designed electromagnetic pulse calibrated to the exact resonance frequency of Zephyrian crystalline structures. The Zephyrians had never considered defending against such a primitive attack. Why would they? No species had ever attempted to resist integration, and certainly not with technology so basic it was considered obsolete by confluence standards. The pulse didn't destroy the Zephyrians. It merely disrupted their ability to maintain cohesive thought patterns, essentially giving their entire delegation the equivalent of a migraine. In their momentary confusion, the automated systems they had installed throughout human space received contradictory commands and shut down. General Harper's voice echoed through every communication channel in the solar system. "Representatives of the Zephyrian confluence, we appreciate your offer of integration, but humanity respectfully declines. We are implementing protocol independence effective immediately." The Zephyrians were stunned, both literally and figuratively. By the time they recovered from the disruption, they discovered that humans had not only disabled their weapons platforms, but had also modified them to serve as a defensive perimeter around Earth. High Administrator Voxleth demanded an explanation. "This is unprecedented. No emerging species has ever rejected confluence protection." Secretary General Chen's response was polite but firm. "Humanity isn't rejecting friendship or cooperation. We're simply asserting our right to self-determination. We propose a different relationship, one between equals rather than protector and protected." Equals. The concept seemed to physically pain the Zephyrian administrator. "Your species is barely 1,000 years into technological development. The confluence has existed for tens of thousands of years. Age doesn't determine value," Chen replied. "Different perspectives often lead to innovation. We believe we have much to offer the confluence if you're willing to consider a new approach." The Zephyrian Council was faced with an unprecedented situation. Military action was possible that risked damaging the very resources they sought to control. More troubling, the humans had demonstrated an alarming ability to adapt to Zephyrian technology. Given time, they might develop even more effective countermeasures. After tense deliberations, the confluence made a historic decision. Humanity would be granted special status, not as a protected species, but as a provisional associate of the confluence. It was an arrangement that had never existed before, created specifically to deal with the unexpected problem that humans presented. As the Zephyrian delegation departed Earth orbit, Captain Nixala made a final entry in her observation log. Caution advised when dealing with humans. They do not follow expected developmental patterns. Their technological solutions are unpredictable and often inexplicably effective, despite theoretical impossibility. Most concerning is their social adaptability. They cooperate in crisis situations with an efficiency that defies their apparent political disunity. Recommend continued observation from a safe distance. What no one realized was that this first encounter was merely the opening move in a galactic game that would ultimately lead to the creation of a very special graveyard, one where every tombstone bore the same epitaph. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Challenge Protocol. News travels fast in an interconnected galaxy, even when those in power try to suppress it. Within the standard galactic year of the Zephyrian retreat from Earth, rumors of the upstart species who had forced concessions from the ancient crystalline empire spread to every corner of the confluence. The Meridian Collective, a consortium of 11 highly advanced species who served as the confluence's scientific authority, convened an emergency assessment council. Their chosen meeting place was the ancient orbital citadel of Nexus Prime, a neutral territory where even the Zephyrians held no special privilege. This situation requires immediate attention, declared arch-theorist Quilm of the gaseous Aetherian race, his vapor form pulsating with concern. A pre-FTL civilization coercing concessions from the Zephyrians destabilizes the entire hierarchical structure of our society. They didn't simply coerce concessions, corrected Security Director Thex9, her multi-jointed exoskeleton clicking as she manipulated the holographic display. They reversed-engineered Zephyrian defense systems within months of first contact and reproposed them. My analysis suggests not just unusual intelligence, but a fundamentally different approach to problem-solving. Their approach lacks elegance, sniffed computational Oracle Zix, whose silicon-based neural network was considered the most advanced individual intelligence in the confluence. Their solutions are haphazard, improvised, almost primitive. And yet, Thex9 countered, they work. The debate continued for days, with faction lines forming between those who saw humans as a threat to be contained and those who viewed them as an opportunity for fresh perspectives. Eventually, a compromise was reached. Humanity would be formally tested. The Challenge Protocol, an ancient tradition rarely invoked, would determine humanity's place in the galactic order. If they passed, they would be granted full membership in the confluence. If they failed, they would be quarantined to their solar system for 1,000 years of guided development. Ambassador Elias Wright received the Meridian Collective's delegation at the newly constructed Lunar Diplomatic Center. At 43, Wright was considered young for his position, but his background in both quantum physics and international relations made him uniquely qualified to deal with alien diplomacy. "We come to present the Challenge Protocol," announced arch-theorist Quilm, his vaporous form contained within a specialized environmental suit, a tradition older than the confluence itself. Wright maintained his diplomatic smile. "Humanity is honored by your attention. May I ask what this protocol entails?" 3 challenges, explained computational Oracle Zix, one of intelligence, one of wisdom, and one of advancement. Success in all 3 grants a species full recognition. What the Meridian Collective representatives didn't say, but what human intelligence analysts suspected, was that no emerging species had ever passed all 3 challenges. The protocol was designed to reinforce the hierarchy, not to welcome new equals. "We accept," Wright said without hesitation, surprising the delegation. "When do we begin?" The first challenge arrived 3 months later. A quantum encryption algorithm that the Aetherian delegation described as moderately challenging. In confluence terms, this meant it typically took emerging civilizations several decades to solve. Dr. Mai Chen, head of Earth's Quantum Computing Division, assembled a global team of mathematicians, physicists, and computer scientists. They approached the problem from multiple angles simultaneously, combining classical computing techniques with quantum principles and even psychological analysis of Aetherian thought patterns. "They think in gas dynamics," Dr. Chen explained to Ambassador Wright. "Their mathematical constructs reflect the way their consciousness flows. Once we modeled their cognitive patterns, the solution became not obvious, but findable." The Meridian representatives were visibly startled when humanity presented the solution after only 7 months. Computational oracle Zix personally verified the results, his silicon neural pathways pulsing with what might have been the machine equivalent of disbelief. "The challenge has been met," he acknowledged, "though your solution method is unorthodox." "Humans specialize in unorthodox," Wright replied with a smile. The second challenge was delivered with considerably less ceremony and considerably more complexity. A diplomatic simulation involving 17 fictitious species with conflicting interests, incompatible biology, and irreconcilable historical grievances. The task was to create a sustainable peace framework without sacrificing any species' essential needs. Ambassador Wright assembled a diverse team of diplomats, game theorists, anthropologists, and conflict resolution specialists. They worked around the clock, modeling countless scenarios and drawing on Earth's long history of complicated peace negotiations. Their solution, when presented 6 months later, left the Meridian observers in stunned silence. Rather than forcing compromises that left all parties somewhat dissatisfied, the approach most confluence species took, humanity had redesigned the fundamental interaction framework itself. Instead of trying to make incompatible pieces fit together, Wright explained, "We created a new system where differences become complementary rather than contradictory." Security Director Thex9's compound eyes rotated in what humans had learned to recognize as the Thexalian expression of surprise. "This approach has no precedent in confluence diplomatic history. We have a saying on Earth," Wright responded, "if you can't solve the problem, change the problem." As word of humanity's unexpected successes spread, attitudes throughout the confluence began to shift. Some species viewed humans with growing alarm, others with cautious optimism. The Zephyrians, still smarting from their humiliation, advocated for more stringent containment protocols. Then came the third challenge, the test of advancement. This was typically the most difficult, requiring a species to develop a significant technological innovation that benefited the entire confluence. The Meridian Collective deliberately chose a problem that had stumped their best minds for centuries, creating stable wormhole connections between distant points in space. Current confluence technology allowed for faster-than-light travel, but not instantaneous transportation. A stable wormhole network would revolutionize galactic commerce, exploration, and defense. "We do not expect immediate results," arch-theorist Quilm explained with what seemed suspiciously like smugness. "The challenge is meant to guide your research priorities for the coming century." Ambassador Wright accepted the challenge with his characteristic unflappable demeanor, but privately he worried. This wasn't a puzzle to be solved through clever thinking or a diplomatic knot to be untangled. This required a fundamental breakthrough in physics. Back on Earth, the United Scientific Council convened its most brilliant minds. Initial assessments were not encouraging. "They've given us an impossible task," declared Dr. Victor Laszlo, the renowned theoretical physicist. "Current theory suggests stable macroscopic wormholes require exotic matter with negative energy density, which we've never been able to produce in significant quantities." Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been the first to observe the Zephyrians years earlier, had a different perspective. Maybe we're thinking about this wrong. The confluence approaches physics from a materialist framework, manipulating existing forces and matter. What if we try something completely different? For 2 years, humanity labored on the problem with little progress. The Meridian observers grew increasingly confident in their assessment that humans, while clever, were not truly advanced enough for full confluence membership. Then came the breakthrough from an unexpected source. Dr. Imani Okoro was not a physicist, but a neurologist specializing in consciousness studies. Her team had been exploring the strange quantum effects observed in human brain activity. On a hunch, she proposed a radical idea. What if consciousness itself could influence quantum states at a fundamental level? Working with quantum physicists, Dr. Okoro developed a system that used specially trained human minds, amplified by technology, to maintain quantum entanglement across vast distances. Instead of trying to create physical wormholes, they created what she called consciousness bridges, quantum pathways that could transfer information instantaneously. It's not a physical transportation system, she explained to the stunned Meridian observers, but it achieves the same result: instantaneous communication across any distance with no theoretical limit. The demonstration was flawless. Information transferred between Earth and Alpha Centauri with zero delay. The implications were staggering, not just for communication, but for remote operation of devices, sensing, and potentially even consciousness transfer. The Meridian Collective was thrown into disarray. Technically, humanity had not solved the exact problem as stated. They hadn't created physical wormholes. But they had achieved the functional goal through means no one in the confluence had ever considered. After heated debate, the collective announced their verdict. Humanity had passed the challenge protocol through alternative compliance. Earth would be granted full membership in the confluence, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Not everyone was pleased with this outcome. The Zephyrians, in particular, lodged formal protests. Several militaristic species began increasing their defense budgets, and in a small, unremarkable star system far from major trade routes, construction began on a peculiar monument. The Munithorian Confederation, an ancient warrior culture known for their fatalistic philosophy, established what they called the Graveyard of Hubris. The first monument was a simple stone marker inscribed with Zephyrian symbols. The inscription, translated into all major confluence languages, read simply, "Here lies Zephyrian supremacy." They challenged humanity. No one paid much attention to this curious gesture at the time. The Munithorians were known for their dramatic symbolic actions and grim sense of humor. Few suspected that this lonely graveyard would eventually become the most significant memorial in the galaxy, or that every tombstone would bear variations of the same epitaph. Humanity had passed the tests, but the true challenge was just beginning. As full members of the confluence, humans now had access to the accumulated knowledge of thousands of species across millions of years. The question that worried many of the older civilizations was simple: what would they do with it? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected, and it would forever change what it meant to be part of the galactic community. The final testament. 2 decades after humanity's acceptance into the Andromeda Milky Way confluence, the galaxy faced an unprecedented crisis: the Void Cascade, a quantum disruption that destabilized the fabric of space-time itself, had begun at the edge of the Sagittarius Arm and was expanding at an alarming rate. The High Council of all species convened on Nexus Prime in the largest gathering of civilizations in confluence history. Representatives from over 3,000 worlds filled the Grand Assembly Hall, their diverse biologies accommodated by a complex system of environmental fields and translation matrices. Supreme Counselor Zephyra of the Zephyrians, her crystalline form gleaming under the ceremonial lights, addressed the assembly with uncharacteristic gravity. The Void Cascade threatens all life in our galaxy. Our most advanced models predict complete destabilization of affected regions within 5 standard years. No technology in our combined arsenal has proven effective in halting its expansion. The assembly erupted in a cacophony of voices, tentacles, pheromone bursts, and electromagnetic pulses, each species expressing distress in their own way. When order was finally restored, an unexpected voice requested recognition. Dr. Maya Patel, Earth's representative to the scientific authority, was considered relatively junior in Confluence hierarchy. At only 42 years old, she represented a species that had been part of galactic society for a mere blinking of the cosmic eye. Yet something in her calm demeanor commanded attention. "Earth requests permission to present our analysis of the void cascade phenomenon," she stated. A murmur ran through the assembly. The Zephyrian counselor's crystalline features shimmered with what might have been annoyance, but protocol demanded she acknowledge the request. The council recognizes Earth's representative. Dr. Patel stepped onto the central platform, her simple blue uniform standing in stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garb of most delegates. The holographic display responded to her gestures, showing complex quantum equations and simulation models. "The confluence has approached this crisis as a problem of physics, attempting to counteract the cascade with opposing forces," she began. "We believe this approach is fundamentally flawed." Outrage rippled through sections of the assembly. Computational Oracle Zix, now elevated to Chief Science Coordinator, interrupted. "The combined scientific knowledge of 3,000 species spans millions of years. Are you suggesting humans, after 2 decades of access to this knowledge, have identified a solution that has eluded all others?" Dr. Patel remained unperturbed. "Not a solution, yet, but a different perspective. Our analysis suggests the void cascade isn't a natural phenomenon. It bears the hallmarks of deliberate engineering." This claim silenced even the most vocal objectors. Arch-theorist Quilm's gaseous form pulsated rapidly. "You're suggesting sabotage. By whom? No species possesses technology capable of such manipulation." "Not sabotage," Dr. Patel corrected. "Communication." She expanded the holographic display to show patterns within the quantum disruption, rhythmic fluctuations that had been dismissed as random variants in previous analyses. "These patterns are too regular, too structured to be accidental. They're a language. Complex, yes, but definitely a language." "Impossible," declared Chief Science Coordinator Zix. "No form of intelligence could survive within such quantum states." "No form of intelligence we've encountered," Dr. Patel agreed. "But what if there are beings that exist within the quantum foam itself? Entities for whom the space between subatomic particles is as vast as interstellar space is to us?" The assembly fell into stunned silence. The concept wasn't entirely without precedent. The confluence had catalogued countless forms of exotic life, but nothing that operated at such a fundamental level of reality. Supreme Counselor Zivera recovered first. "Even if your theory has merit, how does this help us stop the cascade?" "If it's communication, we need to answer," Dr. Patel replied simply. "We've been treating this like an attack when it might be a question, or even a greeting." The debate that followed was the most heated in Confluence history. Many species dismissed the human theory as desperate imagination. Others saw dangerous naivety in attempting to communicate with an unknown force capable of unraveling reality itself. The Zephyrians, still harboring resentment from their first encounter with humanity, were particularly vocal in their opposition. In the end, it was the ancient observers, a reclusive species of silicon-based intelligences who rarely participated in confluence politics, who tipped the balance. Their representative, a being so old that entire civilizations had risen and fallen during its lifetime, floated to the center of the chamber. "The humans have earned the right to try," the observer stated, its voice resonating at frequencies that vibrated the very bones of those who could hear it. "When faced with extinction, conservatism becomes the greatest risk." With reluctant approval, humanity was given 1 standard month to develop their communication attempt. If they failed, the confluence would revert to its original plan, evacuating as many worlds as possible from the cascade's projected path. The project, code-named Quantum Dialogue, became the most ambitious cooperative effort in human history. Dr. Patel led a team that included linguists, quantum physicists, consciousness researchers, and specialists in Dr. Okoro's consciousness bridge technology. They worked around the clock, developing a system to translate human thought patterns into quantum fluctuations that might be recognizable to entities existing within that realm. The implementation required constructing a massive consciousness amplifier at the edge of the Cascade Zone. Volunteers would use the modified bridge technology to project their thoughts directly into the quantum foam, attempting to establish contact with whatever intelligence might exist there. "This is madness," computational oracle Zix declared when the plan was presented. "You cannot simply think at quantum particles and expect a response." "Actually," Dr. Patil countered, "that's essentially what consciousness does all the time. According to our research, the quantum effects in neural systems suggest consciousness itself may be a quantum phenomenon, a bridge between the macro world we perceive and the quantum reality beneath." As the apparatus was being constructed, the Munithorian Confederation added another marker to their curious graveyard. This one bore the symbol of the entire scientific authority. The inscription read, "Here lies confluence physics." They challenged human intuition. Few noticed this addition at the time. All eyes were on the desperate human attempt to save the galaxy through what many considered little more than mysticism dressed in scientific language. The day of the attempt arrived with little ceremony. The void cascade had accelerated, consuming 3 star systems in the previous week alone. Most confluence species had already begun evacuation protocols for threatened regions, expecting humanity's effort to fail. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now in her 70s but still Earth's foremost expert on alien contact, volunteered to be the primary consciousness donor. She would be supported by a team of 20 others, their minds linked through advanced versions of Dr. Okoro's technology. "The key is openness," she explained to the observers. "We're not trying to impose our understanding. We're offering our perspective and inviting exchange." As the system powered up, Dr. Vasquez and her team entered a meditative state. The consciousness amplifier hummed with energy, translating their collective neural patterns into precisely calibrated quantum fluctuations directed at the leading edge of the cascade. For 3 hours, nothing discernible happened. Supreme Counselor Zephyrians was preparing to order the termination of the experiment when the sensors detected something extraordinary. The cascade's expansion had stopped. "Temporary fluctuation," Chief Science Coordinator Zix insisted. "It will resume momentarily." But it didn't resume. Instead, the disruption began to change, forming patterns that mirrored those being sent by the human team. The quantum dialogue had been established. What followed was communication unlike anything previously recorded. Not words, not images, but direct exchanges of conceptual understanding between fundamentally different forms of consciousness. Dr. Vasquez later described it as like explaining color to someone who has never seen, while simultaneously learning to perceive an entirely new sense. The entity, or entities, existing within the quantum foam had not been attacking the galaxy. They had been reaching out, curious about the strange macro-scale structures that had been affecting their quantum domain through technologies like FTL drives and artificial gravity. The cascade was their attempt to examine these phenomena more closely, unaware of the destruction it caused at our scale of existence. As understanding grew between the species, the cascade not only halted but began to reverse. The quantum beings, now aware of their impact, carefully reconstructed the damaged regions of spacetime. Within days, stability returned to the affected systems. But the true revelation came in what the quantum beings offered after this initial exchange. Access to understanding of reality at its most fundamental level. Knowledge that made even the most advanced confluence physics seem like a child's drawing compared to a holographic simulation. The Zephyrians, to their credit, were the first to recognize the magnitude of what had happened. Supreme Counselor Zephyrians addressed the reconvened assembly with uncharacteristic humility. For 10,000 years, The confluence has explored the galaxy through the lens of our established understanding, she said, her crystalline form subdued. We have built technologies, cultures, and civilizations upon what we believed were immutable foundations of reality. Today, we have been shown that our perspective was but one among many, and perhaps not even the most significant. She turned to the human delegation. Humanity has existed among the stars for less than a heartbeat in cosmic time. Yet in that moment, you have taught those who would have been your teachers. You have seen possibilities where we saw only problems. You have reached understanding where we saw only chaos. In the months that followed, the structure of the confluence underwent a transformation. The rigid hierarchy that had placed ancient species like the Zephyrians at the pinnacle of authority gave way to a new system, one that valued perspective and approach over age and accumulated knowledge. The cosmic dialogue, as the ongoing exchange with the quantum beings came to be known, revealed new frontiers of science, philosophy, and existence that no confluent species had imagined possible. Humanity, with its unique approach to consciousness and reality, found itself in the unexpected position of facilitating this exchange between the macro and quantum realms. And on a small, unremarkable world far from the major trade routes, the Munithorian graveyard continued to grow. New markers appeared with increasing frequency, each bearing the symbol of a different confluence institution or firmly held belief. Each inscription followed the same pattern. Here lies certainty/authority/limitation. They challenged humanity. Eventually, as centuries passed, the graveyard became a place of pilgrimage, not of mourning, but of celebration. It stood as a testament to the greatest lesson humanity had taught the galaxy, that true advancement comes not from accumulating knowledge, but from remaining open to having that knowledge challenged, expanded, and sometimes completely rewritten. The final monument, placed at the center of what was now called the Garden of Renewal rather than a graveyard, bore no specific institutional symbol. Its inscription read simply, "Here lies the certainty that we cannot grow beyond what we are." Humanity reminded us that we can. And so it came to pass that across the vastness of space, beings of all forms and origins would encounter monuments bearing a single name, not in defeat, but in gratitude. For in challenging humanity, they had discovered something far more valuable than victory: the capacity to transcend their own limitations. In the grandest of ironies, the species that had once been dismissed as primitive, chaotic, and barely worthy of notice had become the catalyst for the greatest transformation in galactic history, not through conquest or technological superiority, but through the uniquely human gifts of questioning the obvious, imagining the impossible, and never accepting that any problem is truly unsolvable. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all.